If you would have told me that this year's Eastern Conference Finals would feature neither the Celtics nor the Cleveland Cavaliers, I would have said you were a foolish, foolish individual who's trying to pull one over on me. While the top two teams were getting the spotlight for their regular season dominance, the Knicks and Pacers each had respectable but not particularly standout 50-win seasons. Both teams figured it out later on into the year, especially on the defensive end of the floor, and they've absolutely earned their place representing the Eastern Conference, even if they got here with a pretty outlier outcome. I think this is a pretty even matchup. Honestly, a coin toss. It can go either way, but I'm not going to be a coward. I'm still going to give you a prediction as much as I would like to be a coward because I really do not know. But Knicks versus Pacers, who will win? Let's talk about it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. So, this video is going to be a little bit different than my typical previews because I kind of got into a flow state as I was writing the outline of this video, and I did that without doing the clip sourcing throughout it. I watched the games, get a bunch of different clips noted, then I add it progressively, but I just kind of kept writing and writing and writing and didn't need the clips, so they're not going to be here. I like to say all the time that the numbers for the matchup, regular season, and all the clips and all of that, it's just supplementary material and it's not the real meat and potatoes. Let me know how y'all feel about it though. This is just what it is, so I hope you like it. This is an NBA playoff matchup with a rich history. These teams have faced off in 8 NBA playoff series, with 5 of those coming in the 1990s. Of the 48 games that were played in total, Indiana has won 26 of them, holding the slight advantage. Most of these games in the 90s were, well, all of them in the 90s were between the Reggie Miller Pacers and the Patrick Ewing New York Knicks. This was a very intense rivalry that made for a phenomenal B-plot for the Eastern Conference behind his airness, of course. Some of the best playoff moments in the history of this game happened in these matchups, the best of which being Reggie's 3, then steal, then 3 to tie the game. In their 5 matchups in this era, the Pacers managed to win 3 of them, though New York won the most important one in 1994, allowing them to make their way to the NBA Finals. Since then, they played again in the LeBron Heat era at the very tail end of it. This is actually a matchup between 2 of my favorite NBA teams of all time. I love the 2013 Knicks because of J.R. Smith and Tyson Chandler. Both are some of my favorite players of all time, especially J.R. Smith. And I loved this Pacers team mostly because I hated LeBron and the Heat, and I really liked PG's dunk on Birdman. Unfortunately, J.R. Smith shit the bed in this series, so there's not a lot of fun memories there, and Game 6 ended with a huge block from Roy Hibbert on a Carmelo Anthony dunk attempt, and that shifted the momentum in their favor and was basically the start to the end of that game. The most recent matchup was last year in a series that ended up going 7 games. New York had some injury issues, which certainly affected them, but Indiana had a remarkable offensive series and closed in an emphatic way in Game 7 with a blowout win. But with the history out of the way, let's speculate on the future. I want to say right out of the gate that a major failing in my commentary over this year's playoffs has been how I just haven't really talked about what Indiana has done so well. When I talked about that second round series, I loved this year's Cavs team a lot. They're one of my favorite teams that I've watched in a long time. So much of my focus in the commentary was just on me being upset at this result. Of course, injuries played a big part in this result, but plenty of teams get injury breaks and they don't capitalize on them as effectively as Indiana does. The Pacers, in my opinion, have the most underrated star in the NBA in Pascal Siakam, and 2 strong contenders for the most underrated role players / great starters in the NBA in Miles Turner and Aaron Nesmith. Miles is pretty well known at this point. He's been in the NBA for quite a while, but his jump shot has reached another level this year. That has really bumped his value a lot because he's gone from one of those guys who was a good shooter for a center, which if you've been around long enough, you know that in the case of shooting anyways, I really hate a positional qualifier because in terms of the X's and O's of it all, you're either a good shooter or a bad one. It doesn't really matter what your position is. But Miles was one of those guys who was just always a better shooter in theory than in practice. but this year he has shot exceptionally well. His career three-point percentage before this was 34.5%, which is below league average every year. But this year, he has shot so well, his career average three-point percentage of 34.5%. Now, he's at 5.5 attempts per game, shooting 39.6%. That is a huge bump. And in the first two rounds, he brought his attempts down a little bit to just 4 per game, but he's shooting 45 damn percent. He's also shooting 50% from mid-range on decent volume. And also, I went and looked at his stats, dude. Miles Turner only takes like 10% of his shots from like 10 to 16 feet, but he shoots damn 60% on them the last couple of years. It's actually kind of nuts. And Aaron Nesmith, I actually think he is the most underrated role player. He's a really good defender, a really good shooter. He doesn't make many mistakes. He forces a shot from time to time, but, nothing egregious. And he's prone to big scoring outbursts. He's averaged 14.6 points per game in this year's playoffs, and he shot 48% from three so far. He's such a solid player, and I think Boston letting him go isn't too low on their biggest regrets of recent history list. But with the glazing out of the way, those big three-point percentages have been a big part of the discrediting of the Pacers campaign that I've been seeing recently. This was the biggest criticism of their playoff run last year, outside of course, the injury stuff, saying that they can't sustain this kind of shooting. This is just a hot shooting playoffs, which was weird because they didn't even shoot well in round one. But against the Knicks across 7 games, they shot 42.5% from three, and they were doing that on just under 30 attempts per night, which is not very high. They also shot 52% from the field because this is also a great mid-range shooting team, and all of the shooting allows them to get a lot of easy opportunities at the basket. The thing is, though, their three-point shooting volume was not crazy at all. They really only took super high percentage, high-quality looks, and they scored a higher percentage of their points inside the line than the average NBA team does. The Pacers have a ton of really, really good shooters, but they don't take a lot of bad threes pretty much ever. They've been really good at this pretty much all year, besides for Nembhard, who shot terrible this year. But how do I expect their percentages from the first 2 rounds to translate? Are they going to hold up in this series? Well, no, that would be pretty exceptional. Not only is it really, 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 really hard for your team to shoot 40% from three all the way to the NBA Finals. In fact, it's something that I have no idea how to put this question into a search engine, but I would have to guess that's never happened in NBA history before, or at least not in the modern era. But more importantly than that, this Knicks team is going to be the best defense that they have faced in the last 2 years, besides for obviously the championship Boston Celtics. New York obviously got smoked on defense in this series last year, but there were injuries, ones that guys played through, and more importantly, the 2025 Knicks, their defense is just way better. There's different personnel and different execution. The reason, and I will not hear anything different, that Boston went down 2-0 to New York was that they played exceptional three-point defense. It was one of the best displays of perimeter defense that I have seen in the 2020s. Was a lot of this due to Boston's bad tendencies? Absolutely it was, but that's what good defenses are designed to do. Put you in positions to put your worst tendencies on full display. Tatum's worst tendency is settling for dumb pull-up, step-back / sidestep threes, so they established a backline defense that kept him out of the paint, especially when Mitchell Robinson was in the game, and they allowed him to get whatever mismatch he wanted on the perimeter. He either got Cat or Robinson on him, and they did a decent enough job staying in front of him that he settled for the three, or he got Jalen Brunson, and New York quick switched again, giving him some space, and he would take a shot that would end up being decently contested anyways. In Game 3, and in a large part of Game 4, Boston did a much better job of getting the defense in rotation by being more committal in their drives and just driving more in general. They also reduced a lot of their bad three-point attempts. But in the fourth quarter of Game 4, New York still managed to grind Boston's offense and three-point shooting to a complete halt. I don't remember what the numbers were, but the Celtics shot like piss in that quarter, like ass out of a butt. Like ass out of a butt? That's not. Cleveland, even as a good defense this year, was weak on the perimeter. and their best perimeter defender was kind of unplayable because his jumper is broken, and their next best perimeter defender, who is a good scorer, and DeAndre Hunter, unfortunately missed large parts of the series. And Milwaukee's best perimeter defender is Giannis, but he's also just their best everything defender, who is not really someone you're just going to put on a guard. So after that, it's like Taurean Prince, maybe Gary Trent Jr. This time around, the shooting's not going to come as easily as it did in those series. I still expect them to win the three-point battle. I'd be pretty shocked if the Pacers did not win the three-point battle, but not by the margins that they have in the playoffs to this point. Now, as for how Indiana will counteract this perimeter defense, well, a great thing that they have in their favor by contrast to Boston is Halliburton's playmaking and pull-up three-point shooting, which is much better than Jason Tatum's, as well as just more well-versed depth of scoring across the team, which is weird to say about Boston because that's kind of the staple. That's the thing that made them the championship team they were last year, is just everybody could do it. But with glass cannon Kristaps Porzingis and a falling off Drew Holiday, it fell down to just 3 guys for Boston this year, being Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum. And they all scored the ball well in that series. They all averaged 20 plus. Well, they didn't score it well, but they, still scored 20 plus. But Peyton Pritchard was the only other Celtic who averaged 10 plus points. Through 2 rounds, Indiana has 6 players averaging double digits, and in their starting lineup, their point per game average ranges from 14.6 to 18.1. They also have smart players who know how to find the right shot, and they all look for the best one unselfishly. Every player keeps the ball moving, and they don't get dumb turnovers very often. The Pacers are leading the playoffs so far with an average of 29.7 assists per game, but they're only ranked 5th in turnovers. That's exceptional. Their spacing is so good that it opens up paint opportunities. Like I said, they're great in the mid-range, so what could help them dice up New York's defense is their playmaking and their ability to draw New York's bigs out of the paint. The only time where Mitchell Robinson looked vulnerable was when Kristaps Porzingis or Al Horford were the only bigs on the floor. They ended up having to play a lot of Cornet, and Mitchell was able to really dominate those minutes because the spacing was just not good. Not by contrast to Boston's typical spacing and Indiana's spacing. Miles Turner isn't made of glass, and he's a better three-point shooter, at least this year, than Al Horford. He's especially better at hitting contested threes. And he's gonna pull Mitchell Robinson out of the paint if you give him that matchup. And he's pretty great on his feet for his size, but that doesn't mean that's where you want Mitchell to be. Now, as for the individual matchups, I do imagine that the Knicks feel less comfortable with a Brunson switch on Halliburton over Tatum. And I know that feels weird because Tatum is the bigger player, but really their previous strategy last series with Tatum when they had the Brunson matchup was Brunson would just kind of bump him, give him a second of daylight, but make him take a second to wind into that shot. And he would also be like a foot or two behind the line. And then a switch would happen and a contest would end up being there anyways. But Halliburton is a better shooter than Tatum. At the very least in the playoffs for the last 2 years, that is undeniably the case, especially pull-up three-pointers. So if you take this approach of like, oh, give Hallie this split second of opening for us to make a switch, and if he takes a pull-up three, we live with that. Well, with Halliburton, you can't really live with that. Halliburton's going to make you pay way more than Jason Tatum made you pay for leaving that option open. Brunson will probably be matched up with Aaron Nesmith. That's really the best option you can because I think Nembhard just has a little bit too much off the dribble juice. The thing though, Aaron has some too. Like he's also pretty physical, so I would not be shocked at all to see Indiana try to attack that, but probably less isolation and more using him as a screener to get Brunson involved in the action. Aaron is strong, he can set good screens, and he's an effective enough roller, especially popper, and short roll passer. Hell, he's even a pretty damn good mid-range shooter. I think with the starters, Cat will get the Miles Turner assignment, and then OG will be on Siakam. But with the double bigs lineup, I think it makes sense to put Cat on Miles and Mitchell Robinson on Siakam. I trust Mitchell to defend Siakam well enough inside the line, and he is their weakest link shooting-wise in the starting lineup. Bear in mind, I'm saying that with the shooting being exceptional on this team because he is their lowest volume shooter. He takes under 4 of them per game, but he is shooting 44%. So that's great. And yet it's somehow also the 6th best percentage on this team. And in the modern NBA, if you have 4 great shooters and 1 good one on the floor, well, the good one is going to get treated like a non-shooter to some degree a lot of the time because it just is really, 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 really hard to play defense if you truly have to stick to all 5 players on the perimeter. So good percentage on super low volume, a defense is going to play those odds and say, I don't think you're really a shooter like that. So I do think that you're going to have to make that switch because, yeah, you're going to give up some threes. He's going to burn you on a few of those, but it allows Mitchell to hover around the rim a lot easier. And Miles Turner is just a bona fide sniper. I think he's a way better shooter than Siakam. So this seems like the better option to me. I think it would be better to try and do these double big lineups when Halliburton and Siakam are on the floor at the same time, because when it's a Siakam-led lineup, I would honestly rather have OG in the game to defend him. I would worry more about the one-on-one matchup in the context of him doing more one-on-one stuff. OG has the best physical profile on the team to defend Pascal, though I'm sure Bridges will also do a great job, and Hart would probably do a fine job as well. I also think that Josh Hart will get the Nembhard assignment. That's what makes the most sense to me anyways. He will also probably roam off of him a little bit, but even if Andrew technically shot 29% in the regular season from 3, I think New York would be foolish to treat him like he's a non-shooter. I don't think that is true. So as far as how Indiana handles New York's defense, as always, I have to say Halliburton has to remain aggressive whenever he does that, as long as he isn't falling asleep at the wheel, which he does from time to time. That makes a huge difference. And as long as there's not a complete polar ice caps shift on their shooting, I think they're going to be fine on offense, if not pretty damn good. Worse than the previous 2 rounds, I would be shocked if they were not worse than the previous 2 rounds. But it'd be enough to win the series. As I said, Indiana's defense is the biggest reason they have gotten here, though. The biggest reason that they are a genuine contender right now, because we knew that Indiana's defense did get better this year than it was last year. You know, we knew this going into these playoffs, and I knew that they had closed the season strong, but I wasn't super confident that that would hold up to the scrutiny of the playoffs. Would it be improved? No doubt, but would it actually be good defense? Like really good defense? I didn't expect that. And that's exactly what we got. Their defensive rating is just below New York's for this year's playoffs, and I think they can do a good enough job to match New York's quality of defense. I'm sure Brunson will see a good amount of both Nembhard and Nesmith. I think Andrew is the better defender, and Aaron's got more physicality. Plus, there is also, they want to throw different defenders at him just to, not let him know what he can expect. What's really interesting to me is how they defend Josh Hart, because while I think I'm pretty confident in how New York is going to approach trying to do a non-spacer thing, even if Siakam is not the non-spacer that Hart is. With non-shooters, you get 2 possible benefits, and I'm just not sure which one the Pacers are gonna want to go with. Like, you can either use it to hide a bad defender or one that you just don't want to get beaten up too much, who's usually an offensive guy like Halliburton, or you use that to put a good defender on the non-shooter so they can be untethered to having to play man defense and free roam and play free safety and all of that. Indiana wants to hide Halliburton on defense, but they also don't want their best rim protector in Miles Turner to get pulled out of the paint by Karl Anthony Towns. So I think the best option is putting Halliburton on OG or Bridges and just kind of living with that, because I think it makes the most sense to have Siakam on Cat. So again, Miles can free roam. Siakam can handle him in the post well enough, and Miles can time his contests to make sure that he doesn't take too much advantage of the size difference there. When the double big lineup is in for New York, I think that Miles will get Robinson so that, again, he can just keep his presence around the rim with Siakam remaining on Towns. And when Miles is off of the floor, I'm sure Siakam would also be devastating in that free safety role off of Josh Hart. You just want to have the most ideal defensive player on Hart, allowing him to be just mostly a help guy. OG and Bridges are both good, but extremely inconsistent offensive players, and OG gets most of his offense created for him. So mostly you just need to be in the right spot. Man and one-on-one defense doesn't matter as much. So I would say you go with Halliburton on OG. Bridges is going to cook him on the middies, but OG is more physical. I don't know. I can see a strong case for a variety of approaches here. Like I said, this is a hard one for me to pinpoint. I also think you just end up going with more Andrew now that I'm thinking about it, rather than Aaron Nesmith on Brunson, because you're going to want Nesmith's physicality on New York's wings, especially if one of them is going to be getting the Tyrese Halliburton matchup. You don't want to give them too much easy stuff, because that Halliburton matchup will be a weak point. Cat needs to be a much higher volume three-point shooter than he has been to this point to keep Indiana's defense honest, to make sure that they're not packing the paint. I don't know why Tibbs uses this guy the way that he does sometimes. It's deeply confusing and upsetting to me. Brunson is going to get his. There's no worries there, but the inconsistency of their next best three scorers is a real problem, and that's not something that Indiana really struggles with. If the Pacers can truly put up a defensive performance at or near the level of New York, then I think they win this series, because Indiana, to me, is just clearly the better offense. That shouldn't be the case, because New York, in my opinion, has the more talented starting five, though it's not by like some super wide margin. But Tom Thibodeau is remarkably uncreative in his approach to offense. The Knicks often devolve into Brunson ball, which is as inefficient and ineffective as it is ugly. Just saying, fuck it, Brunson, you do everything, is a very 2010s and earlier approach to the game that looks embarrassing in contrast to a well-rounded, well-oiled machine of this egalitarian Pacers offense. Speaking of pace, that is also a big issue. Indiana does a lot of full court pressure, which slows the pace of their opponent, and it puts the pressure on them to force more turnovers so they can get on the break. But, given they know how to slow down their opponent, it doesn't even matter, because that was already going to happen, because the Knicks are slow as hell by default, by design, or by a lack of design, honestly. However you want to put it, Indiana is almost certainly going to outscore New York in the fast break, and with how much the offense relies on Brunson, by contrast to Indiana's communist-ass offense, I see no reason to believe that New York will be the better half-court offense either. So if you can't be the better full-court fast break offense, and you can't be the better half-court offense, well, I got bad news for you, because that's all of the court offenses that we have. That's all of the damn court. New York has to be the clearly better defense between these two if they want to win this series. I would be shocked if they manage to be clearly the better offense. Another huge factor in this series is depth and injuries. New York starting five across 12 playoff games has played 2,297 minutes, which is 191 minutes per game and 38.3 minutes per player. Indiana's starting five, meanwhile, across 10 games has played 1,596 minutes, which is 159 minutes per game, 31.9 minutes per player. New York starters, on average, have played 6.4 more minutes per game across 2 more games to this point. All of this adds up, and last year, this series was derailed by injuries. The odds that New York stays healthy all throughout this series isn't low. There's a really good chance that that happens, but the chance that that doesn't happen is also extremely high. It's really hard to have 5 guys all be Iron Men playing damn near 40 minutes every night. It's not impossible, And if they do it, I commend them. And I almost worry that it could set a negative precedent in the NBA because most players are not built to be able to do this. The issue that makes them hard to pick is if the Pacers dropped a player or two or even three, depending on who it is, they have guys who can step up and fill that void. If any one of New York's 7 best rotation players get hurt, they are suddenly at a huge disadvantage. Even without an injury, New York will be stretching their rotation way thinner than Indiana. If they go DEFCON 5 in the minutes and just go starters only, Indiana wouldn't have to match them. They can go quite a few more players deep, and that's a huge advantage. In the modern NBA, an offense needs high-level playmaking from your top guy and an all around the team as well. You need ample shooting, ideally at every position, ample depth, both for rest and lineup versatility, and you need to be unpredictable. New York has really good playmaking from Brunson, and that's really it. The shooting is extremely mid, more than it is good, though it has its moments, and they don't have the depth, and their offense is extremely fucking predictable. Predictability isn't the end-all be-all because Brunson, you can predict what he's going to do and he's still going to get buckets on you. That's not guaranteed to work for anybody besides for him. He's basically the only guy who it doesn't matter that you can predict him. If New York had a better offensive system, not personnel, but system, and like 2 real bench pieces on top of the 2 that they currently have right now, then I think they would easily be the better team between these two. However, they don't, and we got to judge this team on what they are, not what they could be. So if I have to pick, I am going Pacers in 6 or 7, probably 7. Because like I said, I think New York needs to just be devastatingly good defensively, way better than Indiana's, but I do think that's very well possible. As I mentioned, their defense in the first 2 games versus Boston is some of the best I've ever seen, and the Pacers have also been great on defense, but they weren't as good as the peak of New York's defense to this point. So it's very well possible that their defense is just way better. But I think it's more possible that Indiana's defense is on a similar tier and their offense is just undeniably better. New York does have the best player and the best second option, so that does help. It helps a lot. Their team they have the talent, man. That's what's upsetting here, because they have the talent. I don't think this is a talent deficit series by any means, but the Pacers just do more successfully with what they have. These teams have such a dramatic contrast in their play styles, which is something I always appreciate in a matchup. I didn't end up loving that Nuggets versus Thunder series as much as everyone else seemed to, because both teams had very similar weaknesses and the results just kind of became too predictable. But in this series, we're going to see 2 very different styles clash, and we're also seeing the remnants of NBA history throughout it the whole way through. And I, for one, could not be more excited. I have Pacers in 7 here, and I'm praying that it goes to 7 one way or the other. But make no mistake, predictions are meaningless, and I am just a guy. But that is it. Thank you to Rudy for editing this one, and goodbye.